Sorry. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today. Today we have our speakers, Grishma Palkar from University of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Dr. Papri De, postdoctoral fellow, University of Missouri, Columbia, Missouri. So our first speaker will be Grishma Palkar. Grishma, you can continue.
Hi everyone. So the topic of my presentation is understanding the effect of inhibition on the traveling wave in the neuronal network. So here is the overview. So first I'll give the introduction about the terminologies. Then we'll look at the spiking neuronal model. So we can study the spiking neural model by reducing it to look like a Wilson-Cowan equation. So that is what we'll be doing next. Then again, the Wilson-Cowan equation, we can study it in the smooth firing rate function form. And later on, we'll look at the Heaviside firing rate function. And we'll see that we can look at the results that we obtain in the case of smooth firing rate are similar in case of Heaviside firing rate. So we can just study those equations just by taking in consideration the Heaviside firing rate function. So in that case, we'll be looking at the existence and the stability analysis, which we'll be doing using the Evans function. And at the end, we'll look at the conclusions. So introduction. So first is a picture of a neuron. And the second one is a picture of a spike. So what is a spike? If a neurons generate a sharp electrical potential across its cell membrane, then we see that the neuron spikes, and spikes are transmitted along the axon and synapses from the sending neuron to many other neurons. So there are two types of neurons, excitatory and inhibitory neuron. So an excitatory neuron promotes the generation of an electrical signal called as the action potential in the receiving neuron, while an inhibitory neuron prevents this. So now let's start with the spiking neuronal model. So a spiking neuronal model networks are artificial neuronal networks that closely mimic a natural neuronal network. In a spiking neuronal network, each neuron, its membrane potential and the synapse is represented. So the working, so a neuron in a spiking neuronal network transmit information only when a membrane potential reaches a specific value that we call as a threshold. So when the membrane potential reaches the threshold, the neuron fires and generates a signal that travels to other neurons, which in turn increase or decrease their potential in response to this signal. So a neuronal model that fires at the moment of threshold crossing is called as a spiking neuronal model. So this is our model. So in this, U will represent the excitatory neuron, V will be the inhibitory neuron, Z will be the equation for adaptation, SE and XI will be the excitatory and inhibitory synaptic coupling. So GL term is actually the leak conductance. ER is the rest potential, ETH will be the threshold. Then IU and IV will be the excitatory and inhibitory input current. GA is the strength of adaptation. EK is the potentium, reversal potential. Then we have ISIN and ESIN, which are the inhibitory and excitatory reversal potentials. So the remaining terms are GEI, GEE, GIE, and GII. So for any G is JK, where JK can be either I or E. So it will be the coupling strength between the population K to the population J. So in case of GEI, it will be the coupling strength from population I to population E. Then in the equations 3, 4, and 5, tau Z, tau E, and tau I are the time scales of adaptation, excitation, and inhibition. Also, we notice that in equation 3 and 4, when U is equal to U spike, the equation is incremented by 1 over tau Z, and the fourth equation is incremented by 1 over tau V. Similarly, when V equal to V spike, the dSi by dt equation is incremented by 1 over tau I. So now the main thing that we are interested in is understanding what the inhibition, how the inhibition affects the firing of the neuron. So the inhibition term is given by the GEI because it will be the coupling strength of inhibition to excitation. So the next pictures, shows the population number. So we have 400 neurons, and on the x-axis we have time. So in the first case, our inhibition is 0.1, and in the second case, our inhibition is 0.2. So we can see that as we increase the inhibition, the lesser number of neurons are firing. Okay. So again, similar thing we observe if we increase GEI further, we are again seeing that a lesser number of neurons are firing. So now to study this phenomena better, we will try to reduce the spiking neuronal model by using a firing rate function. So any equation of equation 1 or 2, because it was a quadratic integrated fire model, we know that it can be written in terms of the following differential equation form, so that it will have a quadratic term, a linear term, and a constant term. In equation 1, the constant term is denoted by AE and the linear term is denoted by BE, and I have just collected the terms and written them down. So similarly in equation 2, we can collect all the constant terms together and I denote them by A subscript I, and I collect all the linear terms together and I denote it by B subscript I. We also note that in both the equation, the coefficients of the quadratic term will be the same, which I denote by C. So now we will integrate equation 6, which is any equation of the form, which is a quadratic equation, from V reset to V spike, which is from negative infinity to positive infinity. That will give us the time period of spiking. So that after computation, we get T to be pi over C times alpha, where alpha is given in terms of A, C, and B. So once we have time period of firing, we can find a firing rate function, which will be 1 over the time period. So it will be just a reciprocal of the time period that we computed. So now I have just written down in case of excitatory population and in case of inhibitory population, what will be the firing rate. So so I just denote the firing rate of the excitatory population by F subscript E. So I can again, using the above equation, I can write it in terms of A subscript T and B subscript T as square root of 4AE times C minus B square over 2 pi. Similar thing we can get for inhibitory population by just replacing A, B, and C by A subscript I and B subscript I. So thus we can, by using this firing rate functions, we see that we are able to reduce the spiking neuronal model to the equations of system 7, which are actually Wilson-Cowan equations with the adaptation term Z. So this is just done by averaging the equations. And so now let's look at the SCSI plot and see how the null clients and the fixed points look. So now I have the SE and SI phase plane. So I have computed the null clients and we can see that we have 3 fixed points. We can also see that if you start at a point which is after the second fixed point, then the trajectory, then we have a trajectory which comes back to rest after some amount of time. So now let's try to study this by using a Wilson-Cowan model. So this is a general Wilson-Cowan equation with the adaptation term. Again, U is the excitatory and V denotes the inhibitory population and Z is the adaptation term. So I have the other parameters are same as the spiking model. In this So this Wilson-Cowan equation, we are scaling by parameters P and Q so that the null clients, the UV null clients matches with the SCSI null clients. Because we want to match both the models, we'll be scaling them by using the parameters P and Q so that their fixed points, the scale of the fixed point and also the null clients, everything match. So other parameters are the same, only we are adding the parameter theta E, theta I, and theta Z, which are the thresholds for excitation, inhibition, and adaptation. Also, so that we can plot U and V, I'll be considering a smooth firing rate function. So f of x will be 1 over 1 plus exponential of negative SHP times x. So SHP is called as the gain parameter and it modulates the stiffness of the curve. So now let's look at the nucleons. So we have the UV nucleon. So we see that we have three. So in both the figures A and B, we have the UV nucleons. But in figure A, we have adaptation to be 0. In figure B, we have inhibition to be 0. Both in both the phase planes, we have three fixed points. So the blue dot is the stable fixed point, the yellow star is the saddle node, and the green square is unstable fixed point. So we have, and also the stable manifold of the saddle point acts as a threshold for firing. So once a membrane potential crosses this threshold, the neuron fires until the inhibition gets large enough so that's to bring the potential back to rest. So that is when it comes back to the blue dot again. So similarly, in figure B also we see that once the membrane potential crosses the threshold, uh, the adaptation will bring the potential back to rest, but we see that the U will be on for a much larger amount of time because Z actually depends on U. So for the neuron to come back to rest, we need large amount of adaptation. So this can also be seen from figure C. So in figure C, I have plotted U, V, and Z. So U is the red curve, V is the green curve, and Z is the yellow curve. And the indigo blue is the case when adaptation is 0. So it is the U in the phase plane A. So we see there is hardly any change, but when the inhibition is 0, that is the another light blue curve. So we see that U can be on, or excitation can be on for a much larger amount of time. So now we will be looking at spatial connections. So for that, I will introduce K subscript E and K subscript I, which are the spatial interacting functions. And they are normalized so that we have the integral over the entire space to be 1. Now we define the convolutions of this spatial interacting function with any function f as follows. So it will be integral over the entire domain D, K subscript J, x minus y, my dy. Also, we will consider the sigma E and sigma I as the spatial scales of excitation and inhibition. We will set sigma E to be 1. So sigma I will be the spatial scale of inhibition relative to excitation. As we'll be considering two firing rates, so in one case we'll consider the firing rate function, which will be the smooth firing rate function. So it is just 1 over 1 plus e to the a negative gain parameter times x, and in the other case it will be just the heaviside firing rate function. So the plot is the plot of Ke and Ki terms, which are the spatial interacting function versus x. So the blue curve in figure A is the Ke term. So because we have taken sigma E to be 1, so for different values, so it will not change, it will be the same curve for different values of sigma E's. But the Ki function, we see that as sigma I is increased, the height of the curve is decreasing. And also the second curve is the plot of the smooth firing rate function. So we see that as the shape parameter or the gain parameter is increasing, it gives a better approximation to the heaviside function. So this is kind of an idea why we can approximate like a heaviside function with a smooth function by taking larger values of gain parameter. So this is a schematic diagram of our spatially dependent connection. So we have excitatory neurons, we have inhibitory neurons, and Z is the adaptation connections. So GEE is the coupling strand between excitation and excitatory neurons. Then AZE is the coupling strand between excitation to adaptation. GA will be the strand from adaptation to excitation. GI will be coupling strand from inhibition to excitation. GI will be coupling strand from excitation to inhibition, and GI is the coupling strength between inhibition. So the spatial connection between two excitatory neurons is given by KEX minus Y. Spatial connection between two inhibitory neurons is given by KI X prime minus Y prime if the neurons are represented by X prime and Y prime. And between an excitatory and inhibitory neuron, the connection is given by KEX minus X prime. And the connection between inhibitory and excitatory neuron is KI Y minus Y prime. So now using this schematic diagram, we can write this model. So this is very much similar to the Wilson-Cowan model, but I have just replaced U by the spatial scales. And we have same parameters as before. So now let us consider the firing rate function, which is smooth, and I have taken the gain parameter to be 4. So now let's look at the wave, like the population number as a function of time. So again, we see we want to study what happens to the traveling wave or the wave that we get as we change the inhibition. So in figure A, our inhibition, which was GI, is 5, and in figure B, the inhibition is 15. So now we see that again, as inhibition has increased, the time for which a neuron fires has decreased. Right? So it is similar result what we obtained in this case of spiking neuronal model. So now we look at other properties of the wave, which is the velocity and the width. So in this figure, we are plotting velocity as a function of various parameters which affect inhibition. So let me just zoom in. So the first figure is the plot of velocity versus GI, which is coupling strength between inhibition to excitation. So we see that as GI is increasing, the velocity is decreasing. Also, the plot that we'll be looking at is the red curve, because we are looking for the smooth firing rate function. Later on, I will come back to the blue curve. So we are looking at the red curve, and we see that as we are increasing the inhibition, the velocity is decreasing. So this is because as the strength of inhibition increase, the wave gets just shut down very fast. So the velocity is clearly decreasing. So in the for the figure 2 of velocity versus tau y, so we see that as tau y is increasing, that is the time it takes for the inhibition to come on is increasing, the velocity is increasing. This is because the excitation has much more time, or the excitatory wave is on for a much more time. So the velocity is increasing first, and now at some point, say sigma I equal to 2.5, the inhibition comes on, and then the velocity increases not much, so but it increases. In the third picture, we have velocity as a versus sigma I, which is the spatial scale of inhibition. Again, as the spatial scale of inhibition increase, the velocity should decrease, because again it will shut down the wave faster. In figure 4, the velocity is independent of adaptation. This is because now we are considering u very small, but as u will increase, adaptation will have some effect on velocity. But in this picture, our u is very small, so it doesn't show much effect. In the figure 5, velocity as a function of dE. D is the strength of excitation. So as excitation increases, the velocity will increase because the wave will fire faster. And the sixth picture is velocity versus DI, which is the strength of inhibition. So as strength of inhibition increase, the velocity should decrease. So these are the velocity versus different parameters. And this another thing which we are looking at of the wave is the width of the wave as a function of different parameters. And again, we are looking at the red curve. So as the inhibition parameters which strengthen inhibition increases. So parameters which strengthen inhibition are GI, sigma I, and DI. We are able to see that the width increases. This is because again the inhibition increase, the wave shuts down very fast, so the width of the wave will decrease. But as the parameters which increase excitation increases, that is tau y or DE, we see that the width will increase. And again, in the case of adaptation, the GA doesn't have much effect because if you see the scale of the y-axis, but still there is a gradual decrease in the velocity of the width of the wave. So in this picture, I have plotted a U versus V plots. So in the first diagram, I have tried to increase the inhibition, which is the GEI terms, from 5 to 40. So we see that again, as the inhibition increases, the wave will shut down very fast. So the homoclinic orbits will keep on decreasing. But in the figure B, as tau is increasing, that is the time it takes for the inhibition to come on increases, the U can be on for a much larger amount of time. So the homoclinic orbits go on increasing. So next, we will look at this Wilson-Cowan model, but firing rate function will be Heaviside. So the model is exactly the same, but we are just replacing this firing rate with the Heaviside firing rate function. So again, we'll try to investigate what the inhibition does with the traveling wave which arises in this model. So as before, I have plotted a population versus the time. In the first case, our inhibition is 5. In the second case, our inhibition is 15. So we observe that similarly as before, that as inhibition increase, the time for which a neuron fires decreases. So now we also want to investigate the properties like velocity and width of the wave for the Heaviside model. So for that, we do the existence of the traveling wave. So we introduce the coordinate change. We take zeta to be x plus ct, where c is the velocity of the wave. So u, v, and z will be function of zeta, and del by del t will be c times del by del zeta. So I have just done change of coordinates for the Heaviside model and written it in this form. So let's denote I subscript e to be the term which is this one. So it is the term which is inside the Heaviside model for the u equation. I subscript I will be the term which is inside the Heaviside function for the v equation, and I subscript g will be the term which is inside the Heaviside model for the z equation. And now we choose the parameters a, b, d, e, and f, so that I subscript e of 0, I subscript e of a, I subscript I of b, I subscript I of d, I subscript c of e, I subscript f are all 0. So let me show you what we mean physically by these parameters a, b, d, e, f, and later on we will see how to compute them. So this is what we mean. So I have, because we are looking at a population, I have just taken, like, say the 100th population, 100th one. So it is U100 is the green curve, V100 is the red curve, and Z100 is the blue curve. And I have rescaled them such that U100 starts at 0. So A is TA times the velocity. So we know that distance is velocity into time. So once we know the velocity, so TA will be the time at which the U shuts down, or so it will shut down at TA and then it will decay. So it's the time at which U is off. So A will be, like, in the spatial scale, U will be the spatially the parameter when U will become off. Similarly, TB is the time at which the V comes on, and TD is the time at which the V comes off. So B and D will be the position when V comes on, and D will be when V comes off. Similarly, we can do for the Z equation. So T is the time at which Z will come on, and TF is the time at which Z comes off. So we can find E and F, and they are chosen such that this will be 0. So now let's see the computation. Okay, so any equation in the system 15 has the following form. So system 15 is this. So where we have a derivative, so prime term, u term, and a scaled term with the heaviside term multiplied to it. So it is something like this, and heaviside thing is applied to I of zeta, and I has the following properties such that it is 0 at 2 points and it is positive in between them. So we can solve them using any integrating factor method or anything. So we can solve this ODE to get the following solution. So this will give us a solution for U, V, and Z, which we plug back into I subscript T, I subscript I, and I subscript Z to get the following system 16. And F, I have just collected the term and written a generalized function F so that it is easy to compute. So now using system equation 16, we can find C, A, B, D, F by solving the following equation. So now A will be the width of the wave and C is the velocity of the wave. So by just computing C and A, we'll be able to uh, plot a diagrams for velocity and width versus different parameters. So for that, we'll be using Auto to draw the bifurcation diagrams, and we'll study the behavior of the velocity and the width of the wave as we vary parameters such as G, I, tau I, sigma I, adaptation di. So now let's look at the velocity curves and the width curves in the previous figures. So now we'll be looking at the blue curves. So blue curves are the curves for velocity versus different parameters when we have heaviside firing rate. So we see that uh, it it the behavior of the plots completely matches the behavior that we see in case of smooth firing rate function. So they are nearly the same. Again we see that velocity is decreasing at inhibition is increasing, and velocity is increasing as excitation is increasing, and again the velocity has no effect, shows no effect in case of adaptation. So the behavior is nearly similar thing can be said about the width. So again we are looking at the blue curve. So we see that again the blue curve the behavior is very similar as in case of smooth firing rate function. So again, the width is decreasing in case of as we increase adaptation and increasing as we increase excitation. So we can conclude that we can actually study this Wilson-Cowan equation with smooth firing rate function by just using the Wilson-Cowan equation by the Heaviside firing rate function. So now to better study it, we'll be doing the stability analysis of the Wilson-Cowan equation with Heaviside firing rate function. So this is the stability analysis. Again, I will introduce a traveling wave frame, zeta equal to x plus ct, and I'll get the following equation. So for stability analysis, we will linearize the system about the traveling wave u naught, v naught, z naught. So u will be taken as u naught plus u bar, v will be v naught plus v bar, and z will be z naught plus c bar, and we will obtain the following system. So the heaviside firing rate derivative will be the delta function. So that is how we get this following equations. So I have just linearized the model. So now we take u prime to be e to the beta t times u of zeta, v bar to be e of beta t, v of zeta, and z bar to be e raised to beta t z of zeta. Over here, beta is the eigenvalue. And we also use the fact that inner product of delta acting on g of x and phi of x, which we know we can do it using the integral, is actually summation of phi of xi divided by g prime of xi, where xi's are the non-repeating roots of g. So using the definition of inner product and substituting the values of u bar, v bar, and z bar, we get the system 17. So I have written the equation of, I have just collected the terms e to the e and e to the i's and e to the z as follows. So e to the e, I have just collected all the terms after plugging in all the values for u bar, v bar, z bar, and using the inner product definition. And this is what we get, that is equation 18. And similarly, I did for e to the I terms I collected together, and I got equation 19, and e to the z term I get equation 20. Okay, so any equation in system 17. So system 17, we have again a differential term, a u term like delta of zeta, and delta zeta acting on something, and delta zeta minus something acting on something. So in general form, so any general form will be of this form. So again, we can solve this differential equation to get the following solution. So we can find the values of like capital U, capital V, and capital Z, and plug them in the equation 18, 19, 20 to get a system of 6 cross 6 matrix. So we will be using different values of zeta. So E naught of 0, E of A, and EI of B, EI of D, E zeta of E, E zeta of F. So we are getting a 6 cross 6 matrix. So now this matrix has some special properties. So let's go to the Evans function. So let me denote this matrix by M. So eta of beta, which is a determinant of M, this will denote a determinant of them. This system will have a non-trivial solution if eta of beta equal to 0. And we interpret this eta of beta as the Evans function. So Evans function is a complex analytic function obtained by linearizing the system about this traveling wave, and whose zeros give the eigenvalue of the linearized operator. It has the following properties. A complex number beta is an eigenvalue of a linear of operator L if and only if it is a root of the Evans function. The second property is that the algebraic multiplicity of the eigenvalues is equal to the order of the zero of the Evans function. And since the Evans function is complex analytic, there are at most finitely many eigenvalues within a disk. So how will we plot this function? Like how will we study this? So a natural way to find the roots of the Evans function is just to write beta as a plus ib, because it is complex eigenvalue, and plot the zero contours of real and the imaginary parts of the Evans function. So the point of intersection will give the roots of the Evans function. So that is what we do in the next slide. So in this figure, we are plotting the real and the imaginary part of Evans function for different values of sigma I. So in the first case, sigma I is 1.49. In the second case, it is 1.502. In the plot C, it is 1.52. The red curve in all the plots is the real part of the Evans function, and the blue curve is the imaginary part. So let us see what happens to a particular root. So let us track the path of the root, which is denoted by this green dot. So we see that as the sigma I value is increasing, the root crosses the imaginary axis, right? In figure D, I'm actually tracking the path of the root. So the blue curve will be the imaginary part of the Evans function, which will always be negative because I'm taking the root below the real axis. And I am seeing that the real part of the Evans function goes from a negative imaginary axis to a positive, and crossing the imaginary axis at 0. So there is a value of sigma I at which we'll have purely imaginary eigenvalues. So this is actually the definition of Hopf bifurcation. So we see that we are actually getting Hopf bifurcation in this case. So that means our system must undergo dynamic instability, and we must be able to see some oscillations for some value of sigma I. So now let's go back and see if we get some oscillation for a sigma I value, which is close to 1.5 or so. So first we will look at the Wilson-Cowan equation with the Heaviside firing rate. And the figure A again is the value of sigma I is 0.5. Again, I'm plotting population versus time in each of this figure. The figure B is when sigma I is 1.467. Figure C is when sigma I is 1.47. I'm able to see, we are able to see that as sigma I is increasing, where we can notice oscillations happening in the traveling wave. So which says that we will have instability. So we have oscillation, and the value of sigma I is very close to the one we are supposed to have. It's like 1.5 around, and we are getting 1.4647. So now also let's go back. So because we are getting it in the case of heaviside firing rate, we should also get it in terms of smooth firing rate, because we are trying to study that model. So let's go back and see if we get oscillation in case of smooth firing rate. Again, I have plotted population versus time, and we have different values of sigma. In figure A, sigma I is 0.5. In figure B, it is 1.566, and figure C, it is 1.574. And we're able to see oscillations even in figure B. In figure B, it is little, but in figure C, we are able to see quite clear oscillations. And again, the value of sigma I is very close to what we thought it should be.
Okay, Grishma, I'm sorry if I may interact.
Yeah, sure.
You have 2 more minutes, okay? Because
okay.
we have the next speaker, so if you could kindly.
Yeah, I think this is the conclusion.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what do we conclude? So inhibition controls the velocity and width of the traveling wave. So when inhibition has increased, the time for which a neuron fires decreases. So when inhibition gets very small, adaptation will take control of the wave, and we get pathologically very big waves. Also, after doing the stability analysis of the Wilson-Cowan equation with the Heaviside firing rate function, gives the existence of a Andronov-Hopf bifurcation at sigma I approximately 1.49. Hence, a system must undergo dynamic instability, that is, the traveling wave must start to oscillate. So to verify this, we looked at the spatial distribution Wilson-Cowan equation. We observed oscillatory pattern for sigma I approximately 1.5, both in case of both types of firing rate functions. So this is another fast stretch conclusion, but we can say that maybe the spiking neuronal model also undergoes some dynamic instability, because we were trying to study that. That's all. Thank you, everyone. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Grishma.
You're welcome.